Thanks for your consideration of the views expressed in this ThinkTech commentary, which was submitted by the host of our Connecting the Dots series, and which we are calling The Trump War on Art, Science, and Culture.
Starting in the 20th century, the U.S. government began to actively support elements of our society which it had not been involved in before. These things ranged from funding for scientific and cultural research not connected to government contract work, to using taxpayer funds to support art, stage performances, and other such creative endeavors. This support began in the early 1930s as the administration of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt worked hard to overcome the disastrous effects of the Depression by instituting what he called the New Deal. In acknowledging that not only blue-collar workers had lost their incomes, the Roosevelt administration provided relief monies and jobs to people in the arts as well. As one example, the federal government supplied money to composers, musicians, and actors to create and produce stage plays. For another, the government hired artists to paint murals and create sculptures for federally funded buildings. This was a significant step for the government, and it established a precedent that had continued until 2025. The Kennedy presidency of the early 1960s carried this idea further through the personal patronage of the arts by President Kennedy and his famous wife, Jackie Kennedy. President Johnson, placed in power after Kennedy's assassination in 1963, increased government support in all these fields through grant agencies. Innumerable schools, museums, and other nonprofit organizations throughout the U.S. received and came to depend on these grants not only to create new programs, but to help people stay alive.
The Trump administration has slashed and burned decades of support and development for this large segment of our society. These Trump policies have been carried out under various perverse justifications. But the bottom line is that they represent a right-wing hatred of anything connected to culture, in the sense of what's considered too highbrow or elitist, and anything that's not Caucasian, Christian, and ultra-conservative. This involves an antipathy for the idea that some people are being handed money taken from hardworking Americans to support useless woke people, who they now criticize as anti-American, thus further dividing our country into separate adverse camps.
Trump himself has always felt resentment for elites who never accepted him as a peer. This has led him to wreck the White House interiors with tacky gold ornamentation and a ridiculous ballroom, and now also to put his own name on the Kennedy Center, which had been the nation's premier venue for the performing arts. Trump's idea is that if other elites look down on him, he will just take charge and turn these places into his own, which works well for his hardcore supporters, who are likewise scornful of elitist things like ballet and symphonic music. The boycott of the Kennedy Center by numerous performers who canceled their appearances led him to shut the whole place down under the claim of, quote, overdue maintenance. He was angered and hurt by the rejection, but will never admit it.
The termination of funding has profoundly undermined the organizations and sectors that are no longer receiving federal money. Museums, nonprofits, and historical and cultural organizations throughout the country will have to cut back or give up their public programming, from educating and feeding children to supporting art exhibits and artistic performances. In addition, basic things like building maintenance and buying supplies to care for collections will be cut. Scientific and medical research that benefited people here and worldwide has been destroyed. This again fits with the MAGA contempt for people who act too smart. International programs that kept people alive have been wrecked under the false justification that taxpayer money should not be spent on people who aren't American, ignoring decades of soft power diplomacy that proved that we win more support and gain allies throughout the world by giving assistance rather than bullying and insult.
While courts sometime order Trump to stop this destruction, these cases take time to be decided, and in the meantime, profound damage is done. If the midterms do, in fact, take place later this year, and if the voting processes are not effectively sabotaged, enough Democrats could be elected to Congress to prevent him from continuing his war on government funding, including his war on the arts, science, and culture. The U.S. faces a dark period during the remaining years of Trump's term. Some of what he's done can be fixed, but many things are already beyond redemption. This will be true, for example, of funding for higher education and research. If enough talented people in the arts and sciences leave the country, and if enough remarkable people from other countries do not come to the U.S. in fear of potential persecution, we might well be at the end of the period of innovation and creativity that the U.S. has worked so hard to build over so many years.
These matters were the subject of a recent ThinkTech talk show. To see that show, go to thinktechhawaii.com or youtube.com/thinktechhawaii and search on the words Trump's War on Art, Science, and Culture. Thanks for watching, and thanks again for your consideration of the views expressed in this ThinkTech commentary. We look forward to seeing you again soon for the next one. Aloha.